Will the Committee on Executive Management please come to order? Present today are myself, Chair, Councilmember Kia Aina, and Councilmember Wire as committee members. Excused are Council Vice Chair Say and Councilmember Cordero. Also present here is Councilmember Tupola and Councilmember Okimoto live, as well as Councilmember Tolba through video conference. Welcome, members. Thank you all for being here. Before we start our meeting, I have some procedural announcements to make. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to participate orally on all items on the agenda in two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when each item is taken up. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called on. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you are also watching the proceeding on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of all registered speakers. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, if any objections are noted, I will call for a roll call vote. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, if any objections are noted, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, in accordance with HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Since Councilmember Tolba is participating remotely, in accordance with Section 92-3.7 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, Councilmember Tolba, can you please identify each person with you at your location?
Just me, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Okay, members, taking up item number 1, Bill 23, Bill 23, 2024, relating to gifts to the city officers and employees. Members, we have a posted CD1 to the bill submitted by Councilmember Kia Aina. For your information, the summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda addendum. Shall we start with testimony, members? I do see Executive Director of the Ethics Commission, Jan Yamani, here. Would you like to start us off? Aloha and welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and Council members. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify on this measure. The Commission is in support of Bill 23, 2024, proposed CD1. We have submitted testimony as well as research and reference materials for your use as department communications. Bottom line is, we are generally in support of this proposed draft, with the one caveat that we would like to change the terms back from may or must into shall. There are several occasions in the bill where it had gotten changed, so we just wanted wanted it to be reverted back. Other than that, we stand on our written testimony, and I am available here for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Could you simply state your name for
And
the record?
I'm sorry. My name is Lori Wong Nowinski, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director and Legal Counsel for the Commission.
Wonderful, thank you. Members, any questions for Ms. Nowinski? Seeing none, let's move to remote testimony. Madam Clerk, do we have any remote testifiers?
We have Mr. Gary.
Okay, please proceed.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hello, Tim. Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Yes. I spent an hour reading the Ethics Commission's paper this morning and their studies, and I'm pleased that several of the commission members wanted a zero policy. But in the spirit of compromise, I can see some difficulties with that. I support a limit of $25 gift with a maximum per year of $50. And I support most of the guidelines that the Ethics Commission laid out in their study. I also urge public officials to read the room. The last time I testified on this bill, I wasn't privy to the Civil Beat New York Times article that portrayed certain ways of gift or campaign donation. And I just want everybody there to understand that the small gifts lead to bigger gifts. And what I hate to see sometime in the future, any of the county or mayor or other people doing a perp walk. So I can understand the banana bread and the flour lei, but I just want everybody to understand, I've been seeing this for decades of how it starts. And one former city councilman was kind of the king of it. I think everybody knows who I'm talking about. So in the spirit of compromise, I urge you to lower the gift to 25 and not 200 per year, but only 50 per year. Thanks for your time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Tim. Members, any questions for Tim Gary? Seeing none, thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any other remote testifiers?
No one else, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to in-person testifiers. I believe, Madam Clerk, do we have any in-person testifiers on Bill 23?
No one has registered.
Okay, are there any unregistered folks in the gallery who want to testify? No? Okay, thank you very much. Members, we're in discussion. Councilmember Kia Aina, would you like to explain your amendment?
Sure. First off, let me just say for Chair and as well as your staff, I wanted to thank you for the bill as introduced, Bill 23. And I also wanted to thank the Executive Director for the Ethics Commission, Jan Yamane, and her staff for their testimony on the original version of Bill 23, as well as for taking time to talk through recommendations with my office. Through numerous conversations with the Executive Director and her team, it looks like we have an agreement on language, so I support their proposed amendments and would support incorporating them as verbal amendments today. My proposal will clean up the definition of financial relationship with the city, by removing the language, the paying of a city tax, parking meter fee, or parking lot fee, obtaining a driver's license or identification card, personal automobile registration, the purchasing of a ride or pass for travel on the city's transit bus, paratransit, or rail transit system, which are not examples when a person may receive funds from the city, but rather are examples of when a person pays the city. My proposal also updates the exemption so that all gifts by will or intestate are exempt, which is the same as the current law. After speaking with the ethics staff, we learned that the rationale behind blanket exemptions by will or intestate is based on the rationale that there is high likelihood for involvement by courts in these instances, which may weed out inappropriate gifts. Additionally, my proposal would update exemptions for gifts by trust and all other gifts, AKA gifts not by will or trust, to make exemption for relatives and spouses identical. Right now, the list for both is different, and to remove the unsolicited language. The current draft of the bill would make solicited gifts from spouses, parents, children not exempt, which I am not sure was the intention. I also do not see any policy reason to have different relatives be exempt for gifts via a trust versus non-trust gifts. And lastly, my proposal cleans up the new prohibited source prohibition to remove repetitive language about the prohibition applying to a registered lobbyist and a person with a financial relationship with the city. The section refers to the definition of prohibited source, which already includes registered lobbyists and a person with a financial relationship. And I just want to mahalo, Chair, yourself and your staff and the Ethics Commission Executive Director and her staff for moving this forward. At the last time we had a discussion on this, I made a commitment that while the other bill was due to expire, that we would expeditiously move forward with all of the improvements that you've made on the originally introduced measure so that we could pass something before the end of the fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, members? Seeing none, what I want to do is amend it to the CD1 as you proposed. The recommendations by the Ethics Commission are totally reasonable. However, since we didn't actually put it in CD form, what I'd like to do is incorporate the Ethics Commission's recommendations when we come back for a hearing in between second and third reading. That way we all have it in writing as a CD. I know that you wanted to incorporate their recommendations in your CD, but let me ask our lawyers if we're able to do that.
Sure. Since the verbiage was just changing it from to shall, I thought that might be easy.
Okay, do I have to read out line by line what those changes are, Office of Counsel Services?
This is the may and shall language, right?
Yeah.
We know what they are. That's if you're going to refer to what's in the written documentation, we'll just include it in the
Okay, what I've been told is that if we simply refer to it in the written documentation, and it is dated May 1st, Department Communication 312, so you're incorporating that into your CD, correct?
Yes, and the reason being, of course, when it does come back, I actually would just like to have a clean copy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, members? So that's what we'll do. The chair recommends that Bill 23 from 2024 be amended to the posted CD1, incorporating the amendments as mentioned by Councilmember Kia Aina and as previously mentioned by the Ethics Commission in Department Communication 312. Any further discussion, members? Any objections or reservations? Noting no objections or reservations, the bill has been amended to the posted CD1. The chair then recommends Bill 23, 2024, CD1 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduled for a public hearing. Any discussion, members? I just have a real brief talking points. As city employees, we must earn the public's trust every day by demonstrating the highest standard of ethical conduct. The main point of this measure is to ensure that our employees who are in the position of making decisions can't be swayed by gifts or influence of any kind. I'm glad that we took the time to make sure updates to the city's code of conduct ensure these laws do what is intended to maintain the integrity of city government. I've co-introduced this version because I believe that as officers and employees of the city, nothing is more important than our integrity. It is critical that we remain above reproach with regard to decisions that we make in executing these duties. Now, any objections or reservations, members? Hearing none, so ordered. Members, then turning to page 5. I'll take testimony and discussion on items 2 through 8 together as they all relate to amendments to the revised charter relating to the salary commission and salaries. I do want to make a statement before we start. Last year's salary adjustment drew sharp criticism as some people perceive the salary commission's recommendation as shocking. The reality is that there is never an ideal time to raise elected officials' salaries. Fact of the matter is that 19 of the last 34 years, the pay for Honolulu City Council members has been stagnant, often due to the council rejecting recommendations for pay increases. Understandably, they were afraid to take the political hit. However, had the past City Council members over the last 33 years accepted an incremental salary increase at, for example, 3.5%, which is roughly the equivalent to collective bargaining raises for city workers over the years, that would have been 66.5%, and there would have not been a need for a one-time adjustment as was done last year. No elected official runs for office for the pay. I'm confident of that. Even with the pay increase, I have asked many in our community if they would consider running, and they've quickly responded with a resounding, no way, never. I believe that we all have a unique and innate yearning to make a difference in our community. Otherwise, we wouldn't be willing to put our families through the sometimes torturous experience. The early mornings and late nights campaigning, standing on the side of the road in the dark, waving at people as they whiz by. And the early mornings and late nights don't end there. Once elected, we're doing early morning community meetings, cleanups, and more, and staying out until late at association meetings, neighborhood boards, and other community events. It really does take a unique person to do that. Most of my friends and family think we are crazy to put ourselves out there and simply would never do it themselves. But there are a few well-intentioned, trustworthy, intelligent, hardworking, and capable individuals who are willing to do it. And I would say that they are few and far between. But members, we are lawmakers. Yes, lawmakers. We are tasked with making the rule and policy that all citizens must follow. That is our job. Our work, or honestly, the lack thereof, can have a huge impact on the future of our island and frankly, our state. If there is any doubt about the importance of the work we do, one just has to look at the Planning and Economy hearing this morning and Bill 64. Our work today will have a monumental impact on the future of our island. It is our kuleana to make sure that we educate our communities and anyone who doesn't understand or appreciate the gravity of this measure. The future of agriculture, industrial uses, commercial uses, residential uses, and resort uses, just to name a few with regard to Bill 64. We decide as lawmakers where our hospitals can go, where our prisons can go. We deal with our drinking water, our sewer water, and our storm water. We decide what can be built near the ocean. We work hard to create affordable housing, low-income housing, housing for the homeless, and housing for working families. We approve buildings of hotels, condotels. We approve police commissioners, fire commissioners, and decide whether or not there should be an ocean safety department, and perhaps someday appoint a Ocean Safety Commission. We're trustees of the largest park on the island. We work on the general plan that guides growth over the next 10 years, possibly 20 years. We work on the EVA development plan, East Honolulu Sustainable Plan, Ko'olauloa, Ko'olaupoko, North Shore, Central Oahu, and Waianae plans, and currently the Primary Urban Center Development Plan. We must approve or reject the city's borrowing of hundreds of millions of dollars to build our capital improvements. We must pass a balanced $4 billion budget. Some people believe our job is to come here just for meetings and simply vote yes or no. And that is not how I believe this job is intended. But if you are doing it right, and I see this in our council members, you are spending hours reading and researching and writing, drafting legislation, reading the bills, digging in deep to make sure you get it right, reading mayor's communications, departmental communications, council communications, and these are in the hundreds. And that doesn't even account for the non-policy parts of our job, managing our offices, meeting with stakeholders, addressing community concerns, working with the administration to address issues, neighborhood boards and community associations, attending community events, providing information to our communities. This is definitely not a part-time job. Part-time is what, 19 hours a week? Today is Thursday. If this was a 19-hour-a-week job, we would have been done on Tuesday. At the same time, we just had a robust conversation on gifts. We want to make sure that no council member will be compromised by outside influences. You don't want anyone to be influenced by gifts of travel, lavish dinners, and as we've seen with the legislature, bags of money or poker chips. Even outside employment may cause a conflict when you're trying to make ends meet by having another job. That is what I've seen in the recent recommendations from the Salary Commission, an attempt to adequately compensate for work performed. This job is so taxing. Some of us are single, which could be a product of our jobs. Some of us need to make overwhelming arrangements for our children due to the 14-hour days as well. For many of us, and I'm not proud to admit, but our job has come before our families. Keep this in mind, members, as we look at the best way to deal with the future ways salaries are decided. Having said that, shall we start with remote testimony? Well, actually, I did notice that the Salary Commission Chairperson, Malia Manol, is present. Ms. Manol, would you like to start us off?
We've known each other for so long. Malia Espenda, thank you for the honor of being the chair of the Honolulu Salary Commission. If I could have some remarks, some of it will echo what Chair just said. The Salary Commission is a volunteer body established by the Honolulu Charter in 1985. 1985, vastly different than 2024. In accordance with the law, the Commission makes recommendations for salaries for about 50 city employees, including the mayor, cabinet, council members, based on adequate compensation for work performed and to preserve a sensible relationship with salaries of other Honolulu city employees. That means executive and legislative. Data, studies, and public hearings were utilized to determine what is adequate and sensible. Council member salaries have been frozen 19 over 34 years, 19 times over 34 years, as Chair had said earlier. The result was a disparity in wages relative to the salaries of other city employees. The Commission also conducted a professional national survey study. The results revealed that across 9 comparable city jurisdictions, the city council members were underpaid by up to 51%. In Hawaii, Honolulu council members' positions were paid less than their counterparts in Maui and Hawaii counties, despite larger constituencies and city operations. The Commission's recommendations last year were corrections to adjust council salaries to address this. Even with last year's increases, the salary study revealed that council members are still paid up to 8% underpaid compared to other jurisdictions. The question of part-time versus full-time, as Council Chair just said, there's nothing in the city charter that establishes council member positions as part-time. The reality is, you council members work over 40 hours, reaching up to 60 to 80 hours. You are 24/7, answering and responsive to 120,000 plus constituents. You're responsible for budgets and policies for the city and are expected to respond to demands and solutions similar in the way that city division managers are. Again, echoing, if your positions are part-time, you're done by Tuesday. And you should not be expected to be available in the evenings or weekends, emergencies, city events, community events. You are the public face for your districts, and you endure harsh scrutiny, criticism, and even mockery, despite the long hours, dedication, and effort that you commit. This may impact your health, your mental health, and the safety of your ohana. And over the course of the past 2 years, I have been appalled. Absolutely, given who my husband, I have been appalled what you all have endured. Some by your own colleagues, with nobody calling it out to stop the bullying that you all have endured in the face of these recommendations and these increases. It's been hard for me to watch on your behalf. In addressing the legal obligations of the law, we indexed the legislative branch leadership to executive branch leadership. Last year, after the Permitted Interaction Group and the Commission considered multiple options, we recommended the pay range for an EM8 manager. This preserved the sensible relationship of the council member's salary with those of other city employees, performing similarly high duties and high-level responsibilities to the general public. This is still far below what the mayor, city department directors, department deputies, and other civil service administrators make. We continue to support the EM8 to be consistent with, again, adequate compensation for the work performed. We believe that it should be EM8, and we're indexing to the BU raises. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for the Salary Commission Chair? See, now I just have one or two. I have with me your findings of fact dated April 23rd, 2024, looking at paragraph 5. In accordance with Charter HRS Chapter 92, the Salary Commission's meetings held on there were Salary Commission meetings held on January 23rd, February 27th, March 19th, and April 23rd. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's 4 meetings. Was the public allowed to participate in these meetings?
Repeatedly.
Repeatedly, meaning they could come and testify?
Yes.
As to, and your discussions were also televised?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Members, any follow-up questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, I'd like to turn to in-person registered testifiers. And by the way, you can testify on all matters. Yeah, all matters, items 2 through 8. Madam Clerk, do we have any registered in-person testifiers?
No registered.
Okay. Do we have any in-person unregistered testifiers? Aloha,
One
welcome.
coming up.
Thank you for joining us. Please state your name and please proceed.
Oh, on now. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Walin Christian. I first want to make a quick statement. I had the honor of being at the Salary Commission hearing on April 23rd. I was the only in-person there. I got to talk to the commission members. Thank you, Malia. They explained to me a little bit better about what their job is and what their role is. I had a little bit of a better understanding of where they're coming at with this. So I did share that with some of my colleagues that we all talked together. With that said, I'm coming from a citizen aspect. So I was given the proposed salary increases for 24-25. And when I added up, minus the last two of the schedule of salaries for the deputies of the Corporation Counsel and the prosecuting attorney, that would be an annual pay of nearly $4 million for the rest of the positions that are on there. That includes you folks, mayor, the police chief, fire chief, so on. So that's $4 million that I understand everyone needs to make a living and they need to pay their bills. But our city right now, we're a little more than $2.8 million in debt, and correct me if I'm off on the numbers. I think this is where you're gonna have the issues with the public, because right now as of January 2024, minimum wage is $14 an hour. It'll take 2 years to get a $2 raise to 16, and then an additional 2 years to get another. So $18 by 2028. All of you are aware that we cannot survive on $18 a year. And I'm not saying everybody makes that, but majority of the people here in Honolulu, they are working 2 to 3 jobs. You folks have heard me say that before. I wanted to read something really quickly. I understand what the Salary Commission has gone through, a little better at least. I will say the public still will not understand your position because of the financial burdens that they are experiencing, as well as myself. I did hear Mrs. Espinda, Malia. I heard her say, and I asked this question in the meeting. She said that the positions, that the pays are based off of performed duty. But when I was in that hearing, I asked that. And they said that the salaries were based on the position, not what the person was completing or not completing in their position. So I had asked, how can we get that changed? Because if you have one person, I'll use me as an example. If I was sitting in Andrew's chair and I wasn't doing anything for the people I represent, why should I get that pay raise? Just because the charter says so? No, that should be given back to the people so they can make that decision. So with that said, it says here, what makes you a public servant? A public servant, is an individual who is elected to office and or employed by the government, whether at a local, state, or federal level. At its core, the term public servant denotes an individual whose primary motivation and role are to serve the interests, needs, and well-being of the public. If we keep taking money, let me rephrase that. If we keep giving or allocating money to only certain individuals in the city and the rest of everybody is suffering, we have to find a resolution to that. Whether it's to come into the middle to meet or to break everything down and rebuild, because the people are still suffering. All of you are aware who have social media, you see it going out already about this meeting, and it's gonna go even crazier at the end of the day. They're gonna wonder why all of you folks got 64% raise, with the exception of those that denied it, and then now you're gonna get another 3.59% raise. So I hope you folks see the dilemma of the people and the frustration. I know Salary Commission did not like the way you folks were being judged and maybe even attacked if you felt that way, but put yourself in their position. You folks don't make the $18 an hour. You folks are making 6 figures. I wish I could make close to 6 figures. A lot of people wish they could do that. Cost of living in Hawaii is super high, and they are struggling. What I'm stating here today is look at the numbers. You folks don't need to take this recommendation. You just got 64 last year. Bypass this 3.59 to show the people that you are hearing them, so that you guys can work on what you folks can do on a county level to fix our deficit. There is also the state level that has to be dealt with. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, do you have any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you again. I do see that we have registered testifiers, remote registered testifiers. Well, let me call out first, is there any other in-person testifiers, Madam Clerk, on either side of the rostrum?
I don't see anyone else. I don't see anyone else.
We can't hear you. Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody on this side of the rostrum who would like to testify? Seeing none, let's move to remote testifiers. Madam Clerk, do we have any remote testifiers?
We have two.
Okay, let's start with Tim Gary, then Rebecca Soon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Chair Waters, I appreciate your speech, but also it goes back to reading the room. And I remember when this came up and there were threats made to council people in the chambers, it got pretty heated.
Thank you.
My suggestion is you get paid by the hour. You keep a log of what you do during the day, similar to what the Ethics Commission put on Chuck Totto years ago. And you document your activities. So if you're working 80 hours a week, then you get paid for 80 hours a week. If you're only working 40, you get paid for 40. It just goes back to reading the room. The whole thing was unfortunate. It's created animosity between the council members, and I just wish it didn't happen the way it did. So if you, I understand some of you, I see you guys working all the time. I see Chair Waters till 10 o'clock at night sometimes. So let's put you on the hourly thing, and let's give you $60 an hour. How's that? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Mr. Gary? Seeing none, thank you again. Next, we have Rebecca Soon. Aloha.
Aloha, good afternoon, Chair Waters, members of the Executive Matters Committee. Rebecca Soon. I've served as a member of the Honolulu Salary Commission in 2023 and 2024. Mostly, I just wanted to be here today to help respond to questions that members may have. Heard the kahea from Councilmember Kia Aina, I think at the full council meeting, to be here, so here for that. If I could, Chair, I would though like to spend just a couple minutes to offer a few comments related to the 7 measures before you and some of the underlying challenges that are important in this overall discussion. I don't intend to take the full time, I promise. I can be verbose, I'll try to be fast, but is it 7 minutes? Is that
Yeah.
Okay,
Take your time.
I will try not to do that. I did submit testimony in writing. It's long and it probably came in late, but you folks hopefully do have it in front of you or can reference it as this conversation evolves. I know today won't be the last time that you folks are wrestling with this. The testimony does include 2 draft resolutions that have been part of the discussion at the commission. These aren't resolutions that the commission took any kind of formal action on, but I think that it maybe provides a little bit of lens into some of the discussions and challenges that we've had over the last couple of years. I think that what I wanted to do today, though, was just to highlight a couple of things from that and specifically hone in on maybe 2 or 3 underlying challenges. I think that I can understand and appreciate the reaction to want to perhaps put the salary commission with some boundaries in terms of what folks can expect of their work. I think, though, that unless we address and unless this process addresses the sort of underlying issues that led to last year, then I think we're just kind of going to repeat history. And so I'm hopeful that maybe there can be some more discussion on that. First, I think it's important in the discussion to be thinking about how to ensure that the city keeps up with regular salary updates and not do this kicking the can down the road and then have these large increases. Last year was not the only time that the commission has done a salary adjustment. In fact, the very first year that the salary commission existed, they did a 50% adjustment. Because again, it sounds great to say We're not taking raises this year until that catches up year after year. And here you are 2 to 3 decades later, and salaries are significantly lagging behind every single other comparable jurisdiction. You know, as Chair Waters, you mentioned, in 19 of the last 34 years, there were no raises provided at all to council members. Just speaking personally, I think the decisions made in those years were the problem, not the one-time adjustment to try to address those decisions and the impacts of those decisions. And, you know, one of the impacts that I would like to flag, not to be dramatic, but frankly, I think we've deprived the people of Honolulu of the opportunity to have many more candidates for office that may have run if so many past commissions and councils had not kicked the can down the road. And, you know, we heard from a number of those folks, and we did. You know, this year we had less testimony, frankly, from the public. Last year, though, we had quite a bit. We had a hearing, in addition to the 4 meetings that, Chair, you mentioned. One of those was actually a public noticed hearing in which we did a kahea out to our community, and we had dozens of folks come out and provide testimony on a sort of wide range of perspectives. I don't want to say, you know, it was just 1 or 2 perspectives. It was quite a wide range of perspectives that we heard from and got at a lot of these issues. But, you know, we heard from some folks who had themselves either run for office before or had considered running for office, and that essentially said these salaries being below living wage was just not a sacrifice that they could afford to make without impacts to their families and to their ability to even, you know, pay rent. We heard from some folks. You know, only time will tell for sure whether the decisions that were made last year will yield a more diverse candidate pool. But we do know, when we look at other comparable jurisdictions, studies, other states that have increased salaries, because Honolulu is not the only one that has struggled with this over the last few decades, but when counties and states increase the salaries of their electeds, it leads to greater diversity, including especially gender diversity, age diversity, and especially income diversity. So we actually get more candidates running for office from low and middle income earners, which makes sense, right? Because now that they can afford to actually leave their jobs or perhaps go part-time with their jobs, but truly dedicate the time and attention necessary to those legislative roles. You know, one example that I point out in my written testimony is that most recently, St. Paul, Minnesota actually gained headlines as the first ever all-woman city council. As much as we love and appreciate our Kane, I think we also know that we have underrepresentation of Wahine across the United States. And so they have made headlines as the first ever all-woman council, most of them under the age of 40 and ethnically diverse. They pay their council members up to $118,000. That's more than what Honolulu is paying even after this 2024 proposal. And that's despite a cost of living that's significantly different from Honolulu. Honolulu is actually 84% above the national average cost of living. St. Paul, Minnesota is below the national cost of living. You know, and then on the flip side, when we don't invest in our elected position salaries, we see a shift towards those public office opportunities tending to be more retirees, those with greater financial means, and those that have outside employment that competes for attention and increases the potential for conflicts of interest and other ethics concerns. So I guess what I'm trying to highlight here is that I would like to, you know, encourage that the amendments that move forward out of this committee take into consideration preventing a future commission and a future council from this type of negligent compounded deferral that left the 2023 commission and all of you as council members in the position that you were in. I think that Reso 24105 helps to create some stability by tying the salary of members to the bargaining unit raises. That's something that Chair Sminda has I think, talked about in length, so I won't go in there, but I think that's really critical. And I think it does help to address that underlying issue. For the measures that seek to set an upper limit, you know, I understand the reaction to public concerns. I truly do. Ultimately, my concern is that that approach would prevent this future salary commissions from being able to apply its expertise and its research to making a sound decision. There may be various reasons. I know we're sort of all honed in and focused on the council positions, but the salary commission sets schedules for a number of executive branch positions as well. In the last 2 years, for example, we've had to deal with needing to fill a deputy medical examiner for a department that has really had significant impacts to families having a long delay in autopsies for unattended deaths, having a long delay in death certificates, and really a direct result of just being really far behind the market in terms of forensic pathologists. An independent salary study that, thank you so much to the council for supporting that and being done last year, flagged a number of other positions that we know lag behind the market. And what does that mean? That means we may have challenges in filling them, including, for example, the DIT director that thankfully, we have long lead notice that he's going to be retiring, but we also know that that position is far below the average among comparable jurisdictions. So ultimately, if measures move forward that have a maximum raise, but don't also acknowledge a minimum raise, or somehow ensure that there is not a repeat of the last 3 decades, 20 or 30 years from now, a future commission and a future council is going to be in the exact same position. Second, and I'll be briefer on this one, determining affirmatively that the city council is a full-time position. I know that this is something that not all members agree on. I think that perhaps there's some differing meanings when we say the words part-time or full-time, and then the implication of what outside income means as a result. Part-time here, I think, as Chair Waters, I think you said earlier, under city definition means 19 hours or less. So it's under 20 hours. So, and full-time meaning 40 hours or more. That's completely separate than whether or not someone has outside income or outside employment as well. So while some testifiers we heard from suggested that some outside employment was okay, even I would acknowledge that some said that perhaps it helps members to keep in touch with their professional fields or with their communities and with different hats. I don't recall anyone suggesting that they only expected their members to be working 20 hours a week in fulfillment of this role. And frankly, it was overwhelmingly clear that every member that we heard from dedicated the math on it. The current 2024 as an hourly just for 40 hours a week is about 55 an hour. And so that sounds in alignment with, one of the earlier testifiers. I think that when we were looking at how much work members are actually putting in, frankly, it was putting you folks comparable to the deputies and the directors of departments. And especially as a co-equal branch of government, that was the level that some folks were talking about. And so where we landed was really about trying to balance that concern around understanding that these positions, these elected positions tend to have a different scale, which is why we looked at other jurisdictions. I do think that, my read of the current proposals is that they don't address this issue. The written testimony that provided does include a draft resolution that incorporates some suggested charter amendments that would affirmatively state that this position is full-time, put into place some limitations on outside income, wouldn't prohibit things like volunteer service on boards, retirement income, passive income, or even some amount of part-time income, but suggest some limits on employment income that's presumably from work that competes for time, attention, and interest. But ultimately, I think that having this ongoing debate about whether this is a full or part-time expectation is going to just continue to create conflict and challenges for future salary commissions. So that's something that this committee might consider. And finally, one of the issues last year was the commission's inability to stretch out the salary adjustment across multiple years. That was just something that the charter language was interpreted to not allow for. Had that been feasible under the charter, as I think Reso 24-105 would allow for, the adjustment would have been stretched out across multiple years, perhaps even delayed until members were elected or beginning a new term, which is what I think we heard from some members of this council as well as some of the members of the public. I think, I can't be for sure what would have happened, but based upon the conversations I, was in the commission last year, I think we would have done that, stretched it out or delayed it had that been something that the salary commission was allowed to do. So just, in closing, I certainly appreciate the desire to respond to the public reaction from last year. I caution that constraining the work the commission can do may not necessarily remedy those underlying issues. that I think, in my opinion, is what created the situation that the commission had to deal with to begin with, and this council as well. So as these amendments evolve through the process ahead, I hope the committee might consider how proposed charter amendments that goes to voters will address sort of those underlying issues. I do think that there was consideration just looking at what the other budget needs are. You know, this folks have heard me say this before. Every year, the operating budget lapses nearly $1 billion. That's a lot of revenue that can be invested in our parks, in our cities, in affordable housing, in addressing homelessness, in ensuring that our workforce is paid. I think that we can invest in a way that has a thriving mentality for our community and not a scarcity mentality where everyone needs to do less. I think that we can invest and have a stronger future for our community. And I think that ensuring that our leaders are paid living wages is a part of that. So mahalo for the opportunity and for the additional time, Chair. Here if there's any questions.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions for Commissioner Soon? Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. Aloha, Ms. Soon. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your comments pertaining to what we have in front of us right now. I was very interested to hear, you know, some thoughts from the commissioners about these particular proposals. I do thank you for sharing your thoughts about some of the suggestions you have, like the maximum and the minimum. And I do think that the discussion had about full-time versus part-time has been had in our county, in Maui County, in previous years, and I've read every single document on it, and it always circled back around to that we don't really have vacation days, we don't have sick days, we don't have, you know, so the PTO that other positions get is different than ours because we're kind of more like salaried employees. We don't come in at a certain time or end at a certain time. But I hear what you're saying. I just think when I read through all the documents, the HR hook of it was missing, and we also don't have like a collective bargaining unit either. So real quick, and one more thing that I like that you said, when you talked about stretching it out or delaying it, because a lot of people had suggested that, and you're saying that really you guys didn't have the purview to do that, and that might be something we can address. I guess my quick comment, because now I see kind of what you are saying is positive and which ones you're saying to caution against, is somebody did ask me, and I don't know if this would help, but actually differentiating out elected positions versus non-elected positions, seeing as though we're just totally separate categories. What is your thoughts on that?
Mahalo, Councilmember Tupola. Yeah, I would agree that those positions are different in terms of how the things that the Salary Commission considers. I think, you know, as I mentioned, that if we were to go purely based upon the duties, there's a strong argument for landing council members closer to where the manager and director and where the department directors are. And so it really meant looking at comparable jurisdictions to be able to say, okay, what's reasonable for an elected position? I think where we run into a little bit of challenge is that, as you know, the prosecuting attorney is elected.
Oh, yeah.
That position, same thing, we had to look at sort of other market information that we were able to gather. I do think that separating those out makes some sense. I think that you had mentioned, Councilmember, about the other counties in Hawaii. One of the things that the other counties in Hawaii do, as folks know, is they do not allow for sort of a political action after the Salary Commission decision. I think that I can understand why members of the public want to feel as if there's needs to be more input. I think it's unfortunate that our boards and commissions don't get the same level of attention by, you know, I mean, families are trying to, you know, be out there and survive, right? But I think that media perhaps puts a little bit more attention on certain places that it's harder to get to this kind of depth of conversation. So we don't see as many folks coming out. So I get that then there's this reaction to, okay, I want somebody to hear this frustration. But I think that I think it's a tough road. I don't think we saw any jurisdictions that actually turned to the public to determine what the salary level should be for elected positions, and to determine whether, I don't know that you want an independent board saying, okay, this council member did their job, this council member didn't do their job, we're going to pay this council member this and this council member this. I don't think that that's a reasonable road to go down, and not that you're suggesting it, but I think that that's where we start to get into, okay, how would elected positions then be treated if not based upon what's the actual work performed, and how does that compare to other city positions?
I hear
hope that
you.
answers.
No, I hear you. And I think that's the question I had, because technically we're elected by the public, so we work for them, right? So we don't go report to DHR, we don't file vacation days or sick days with our employer. And I think that's where I was thinking that we have a differentiation between who our boss is and who we work for, who we report to. And that's why it kind of came the way it did. I guess my last thought, and then I'll conclude, is that one of the comparisons, aside from like workload or other counties, was constituency size. Because most of the events or conferences that I go to, like, to be a council member is kind of to represent a constituency of 5 to 10,000, or like, something small where a county council member might do this. And so people are always shocked, because I represent like over 150,000 people. They're like, wow, that's a council district. So it's also another thing that I think needs to be taken into consideration. It's not just the workload, because we really don't have like a huge department where we operate with 100 employees, but ours is maybe 1/3 or half of a congressional district. And so like for a lot of congressmen and congresswomen, whenever they meet me, they're like, wow, our districts are same size. I was like, I know, it's crazy. So I think that's something for you guys to take into consideration, but I appreciate your thoughts and your thoroughness. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions for Rebecca Soon? Seeing that, yeah, you kind of answered these questions based on Councilmember Tupola's questions as well as your testimony, but I just want to go through it one more time. So a couple of the differences between the various proposals are whether or not the Salary Commission should meet every year or every other year. Do you have any thoughts with regard to that?
I think meeting every year makes sense, because it allows for being able to be more reactive to the conditions of what's going on. I wasn't on the commission, for example, when the pandemic began. When the pandemic began, but I can imagine that it was important to be able to have more up-to-date conversations. Also, some of the bargaining unit information comes in at differential time periods, so that makes it a little challenging. So I do think meeting every year makes sense, but I think allowing the commission to stretch out decisions beyond a year is something that would be where I would encourage those portions of the resolutions to really be supported.
Okay. Next, the various proposals have suggested a cap, right? One is, I believe, 10%, another is 5%, another is 3.5%. And then yet another proposal is for a formula tied to collective bargaining, as an example. Did the commission consider a cap, or how do you think we should proceed with a cap or formula, or neither, or even something completely different?
I think the formula is probably the one that addresses the most underlying issues. So, for example, the concern about sort of the political variance from year to year, right? The tying it to a formula, especially if it's being based upon other city salaries, it's sort of keeping pace, if you will. It's still not completely keeping pace, because council members don't get step-ups, right? So even the EM 08 that we have for the last 2 years tied council member salaries to, it's the starting salary and then the average raise. It doesn't include step up. So most EM 08s, for example, make much more. It goes all the way up to about 191,000 based upon their steps. So council members are still at the beginning end of that range. But I think that it creates a little bit more reliability, takes some of the political nature of it out of the equation. I think it makes it more something the public and members and folks that are running to be able to understand a little bit more and count on from year to year. We, in terms of the max, I don't know that there was discussion about just having sort of a set min or max. I think that there becomes sort of a natural, again, there was discussion about raising members to the level of deputies and directors, which would have been far more if we looked at it from a percentage standpoint. And so I think that where we landed was really trying to take into consideration, like, not feeling like it went too far, although certainly I understand lots of folks feel as though it may have. I think that, so we tried to look at a few different factors. We looked at the duties performed. We looked at what other jurisdictions of similar size do. As Councilmember Tupola just mentioned, the 100,000 and more resident size for these counties do put the city and county of Honolulu at a much larger size than many other counties across the country. And so it's important, I think, to look at similar sized jurisdictions. Also $4 billion, annual operating budget, plus additional funds for CIP budget, HART, legislative budget. You folks are managing quite a bit of resource compared to what even some cities that some of us would think of are large cities. Honolulu is actually larger by many of those measures. And so you have more responsibility. So I think that the challenge with the cap is, what if future years do the same thing that the last 34 years did and just do zero raises? That's the issue, right? Is this zero raise year after year after year, and how much that catches up. And then that narrows the window of who are the kind of people that can really afford to make those kinds of sacrifices. Recognizing everybody wants to, but are we, trying to encourage, middle income families, teachers, paramedics to be able to run for these seats? I think so. And so if the cap comes with a minimum, then it ensures that we're not back to where we are now. I think that the cap, to me, is a little more of a challenge because it seems primarily political, not necessarily based in, this is the amount that makes sense because of the duties, because of the expectations, because of the kuleana. I understand it, but I think it presents more challenges than the formula.
Okay. Kauai County, you said this during your testimony, that if you had the ability to have postponed the increase or the ability to put it after an election, you would have considered that. But just to make it clear, you couldn't consider that because the charter, which is equivalent to our Constitution, was written such that it wasn't possible to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I'll just say a measure further. We actually consulted with council in order to see whether or not that was something we can do. And we're told on a couple different occasions that it was not. So we more than just considered it. I think there was a desire to do that should the charter have allowed it.
I'm looking at Kauai County Charter, and it says that no change in salary of council members shall be effective during the term in which the change is enacted for 24 months after a change is enacted, whichever is less. So is this something that you would advocate for? In other words, we could vote on your salary, or the salary that you recommend wouldn't take effect until after your election. So in other words, you wouldn't be voting on your own salary, or it wouldn't apply to you until the next election. That's what Kauai does, but their elections are every 2 years, not like ours every 4 years. Any thoughts about that?
I think that is something that makes sense. It takes away some of the politics of voting on your own salaries and some of the concerns about, folks that ran for office, you ran knowing exactly what the salary was. So I think it takes it off the table, those concerns. I think that makes sense. I think it would also require, in addition to that type of additional language, it would probably also need some kind of amendment to section 3-122, which is the salary commission section, probably subpart 2. And I mean, I'm sure your OCS team can determine this better than I, but I think that is where in some of the attached resolutions that I provided from the commission, we had changed some language there as well, talking about which year the salaries can be impacted for. So just to make sure that it doesn't conflict. But yes, I do think that's a good idea. I think it just probably requires amendments to a few sections to allow the commission the ability to do that.
Thank you. I do want to ask the very same questions of the Salary Commission Chair, but I do see Councilmember Tolba's hand up. Councilmember Tolba, please proceed.
Thank you. Appreciate the discussion. You know, we all bring something special to this council. You know, I'm listening to all the descriptions, all the things that tell us what we do, and I get it. And since we're talking about it, let's and I hope I can bring this, you know, to the everyday man. When I decided to run 3.5 years ago, first off, does everybody know our job description? Because in the 55 years that I've lived on this planet, I've never applied for something that I know I couldn't do, or I know I was not qualified for. All these language sound amazing. Sounds like, man, yeah, we should be getting $118,000, $118,000 a year. But at the end of the day, we're public servants. Every one of us that's watching this and sitting down, it was a calling. I did not go to school to run for office. I ran because I was upset at the way things was moving in the community. I wanted to understand why things was moving in the community. And this last 4 years, I've learned that it just takes more than one person. Absolutely. We have an amazing staff of people that get paid qualified money to help us educate, help me understand the challenges. I'm sad that we've had a discord, but the discord never come because of every one of us sitting in the ship. The discord came about because of the community. I would love to go to bed every night happy, excited that things are moving perfectly in our community. But I ran 4 years ago because I knew that I could take on the task. I knew that I was going to get staff to help me, and I knew that I would bring something different to the table. And I worked my life around everything. And you guys are absolutely right. This is difficult. We get calls every day. But at the end of the day, the reason why we all ran is because it was a calling. We are public servants. This is a stipend. We are American Idol for 4 years. And if we're privileged and people like what we're doing in our communities, we're working hard, we're picking up the phone, we're answering their questions, we're fighting for the everyday man and women and children, we're cleaning our parks, they will elect us again for another 4 years, and we can work around all of that. When we go back and we blame the last 4 decades, 3 decades of council members not taking a raise, what we say to them is that they were public servants. They came in because they wanted a job that was going to pay them a lot. That's what we're saying to the public. We have to listen to the public. We have to listen to what the lady just said. A definition of a public servant. Outside of myself and everybody sitting here, I did not go to college. So we're not here. We got to get the best and the brightest. But when I have the best and the brightest ever fix government. I'm sad that we have to get this discussion, but we have to change so that yes, this doesn't ever happen again. Because we work hard. We work real hard. And I appreciate every single one of you guys. But I'm listening to this discussion and I'm going, of course nobody going to run for office. So I just want to leave my comments to that. And I hope we can find some solutions to this so that 9 members down the road don't have to do this kind of discussion and question themselves whether or not they're a public servant. And I walk around every day. You think I'm thinking about, man, I got 4 years, I got a degree, I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master. No, you're not walking around. I'm like, what can I do for fix my community? So, with that, again, I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate every single one of you guys sitting in council. I appreciate the people that we represent. But again, we all bring a special gift to this council. We all bring something special, something unique. And I always felt that running for office is a calling, and you're a public servant. So with that, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. I appreciate you too. And by the way, this is just the beginning of the discussion. So do you have any questions for either Ms. Soon or Ms. Espinda, Councilmember Talba? No? Okay. Members, any follow-up questions for Councilmember Soon or Councilmember, Commission Member Soon or Commission Member Espinda? Councilmember Wire.
Mahalo, Chair. And, I similarly, appreciate Councilmember Tolba's remarks as well. And I'm glad, even Commissioner Soon acknowledged earlier that, there's a diversity of persons on the council and even those that, have various backgrounds or experiences and maybe various employment opportunities are oftentimes working just as hard at this job. And so I think my main point in our introduced charter amendment with the 3.5% cap, respecting and understanding the perspectives that were shared wasn't to undercut or suggest the commission isn't capable, but was just trying to add kind of a security that maybe it didn't exceed what collective bargaining generally was after we just experienced this adjustment. And then understanding the discussion with the formula, I'm just wondering how would we pair it or could we pair it? And then I guess this would be for Commissioner Chair Espinda or Commissioner Soon to a particular position, because I don't know if like EMO 8 is like set in stone forever or that could change. And if it's in our city constitution, like what could we maybe pair it to be a consistent, wouldn't exceed a particular civil service position or something like that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a difficult, I think as the Salary Commission has determined, EM8 is where it should be. That's what we've determined. This is your kuleana to agree or not. And I appreciate the cap, but as Member Soon had said, we're concerned that the recommendation would be 0, right? So that's the thing, the challenge that lays before all of you to decide how to, and I think that's the work that we're going to endeavor in the next, the next few weeks of working on this. So I don't have an answer because I think that's the whole thing that we're all working through. Maybe Member Soon does. But I also want to take a moment to address Councilmember Talba's comments. I think, everybody here are public servants. Everybody in this room right now, actually, including the staff behind you, and in front of you, we're all public servants. And one of the main points, and Member Soon has said this, we hope, only time will tell, that there will be individuals who are not rich come forward to try to be part of this council. And as I stand here, I am looking at a single mother of 3 as a member who needs this salary, who works her butt off for this job and is absolutely a dedicated public servant. So I don't shy away from the decisions and recommendations we made. And it just, yes, thank you. Oh, if I could also add, earlier Chair, you had a question about if it should be year over year. And the answer is yes, and even with more caveats to allow us to convene in between. Say the IT director didn't give us warning, and he resigned 2 weeks from now. His salary is so significantly low that we will have a hard time bringing somebody in. There should be some flexibility to be able to convene to make corrections or address needs as they arise.
No, thank you for that. I'm sorry, Councilmember Wire, the floor is still yours.
I appreciate that. I mean, that was my main question, because like you said, I do think, I don't know if it could be the cap in terms of if future adjustments are needed, it can be brought up to that position, because obviously that position salary is going to kind of stay the same. I know that 3.5% cap is mentioned was limited, but I think just kind of going from there, another question I had was just a discussion on whether the council should really even be allowed to weigh in on this. You know, given, you know, the recent Civil Beat article that looked at best practices in other jurisdictions. I know that's something that's kind of come up too, is whether it should be something that's left up to the public at the commission and the commissioner's tasked with the responsibility.
I think the salary study is the national trends for your positions. I'm not sure. I think that is where the data and the basis of our decisions are made, are rooted in the information that we provide and juxtapose you all to the national trends. And I would like to see if Member Soon has anything. I've taken up a lot of the air in the answer this. So Member Soon, do you have anything else to add on this?
Chair Waters, is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know from other counties, even within Honolulu, within the state of Hawaii, that that the best practice is for the independent commission recommendation to not be able to have sort of a political interference after the fact. That, you know, you rely upon them to make the decisions based upon research and reason, you know, their reasoned guidelines. And, you know, Councilmember Weiner, in response to your, you know, initial question and comment, I think there are lots of reasons to introduce to put forward. I understand the reasons why to put forward a cap from year to year. I do think it, you know, I understand, for example, like the stability from, you know, the public understanding, you know, what might happen, the members understanding what might happen. And so I certainly didn't mean to imply that, you know, there was a intention. I just think that the impact becomes that it's difficult for the commission to make a decision within what they think is best practice or within the research that they're doing. And that's why I would say if this committee is going to go in the direction of instituting some kind of a cap, one, I would, you know, strongly encourage it be tied, indexed to some kind of city position. So I think it makes sense, right? That like you want to kind of have a relationship with other city positions. And so indexing it to a city position, or as I mentioned, adding in a base, which may be, you know, not particularly popular, but it would allow for ensuring that we don't have sort of this year over year stagnation. And just to be super clear, What we know from other places is that when you pay these positions more, you get more everyday candidates. So if the goal here is to make government more accessible, to have more diversity, to have more everyday people, then you pay the positions more. Hope that answers your question, Councilmember.
It does, mahalo.
Any follow-up questions? Seeing none. Hey, you both mentioned the salary study that you conducted, and I'm looking at it now. Dated February 13th, 2024. You know, the city and county of Honolulu is unique because we are both a city and a county.
Mm-hmm.
As Councilmember Tupola pointed out, that in some counties across the nation, it's very small. We have over 100,000 constituents. The salary study, I'd like to appoint Councilmember Aquino as a member because, Aquino, sorry, because Councilmember Kia Aina left and we lost quorum. We're good, Council? Okay. So looking at the salary study, you compared salaries of like jurisdictions. Is that correct?
Yes.
So could you give us a sample of some of the other jurisdictions that you looked at?
Some of the other jurisdictions include Boston, Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, District of Columbia.
Okay, and that was in large part based on the size of the city as well as the representative districts, I'm presuming.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, so I'm looking at the salary study. And since you brought up Director of Information Technology, it appears that our Director of Information Technology makes $187,488. And then do you have the salary study with you by?
I do.
Okay. This is for 2023.
Yes.
And then 2 or 3 columns down, it talks about the market, meaning the other cities, median value.
Yes.
What does directors of the Department of Information Technology in other jurisdictions make, the median?
So again, you're at he's currently, well, in 2023, 2022, he was at 166,000.
So 2023, the page right in front of that.
Yes, but look at the top, it was actual pay in 2022.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually might have his current, well, let's just stick with this for now. So going to the 75th percentile of the market, so again, 166, if we were to bring him up to the 75th, he's 51% underpaid, and so he would have been 340,000.
Okay.
So you have the range of 166 to 340,000.
Right, and that's pretty much across the board. Comparing Honolulu to other cities, like cities across the nation, is it safe to say that our department heads are underpaid?
Largely.
Okay. You know, I'm looking at Hawaii Island, and Maui's charters, and they're all different. The easiest question here is, you know, Honolulu's Salary Commission has 7 members. Hawaii Island has 9 members, and Maui Island has 9 members in their Salary Commission. Do you think 7 members work, or a 9-member commission is better?
I liked our little commission.
7? Okay.
In my opinion. I mean, I think we had the diversity of the membership was awesome. I mean, it's fluky that it happened this way, but it was a great diversity of members.
You did mention that at one of the council hearings.
Yes.
Can you mention that again?
Sure. So
Your members are made up of?
On our particular commission, I had 2 retired HR directors from the city. I had 2 attorneys so the 2 HR directors obviously brought the insight of the city operations and their roles and past negotiations, if you will. the two attorneys brought strategic thinking, and one of them included Member Soon, who is herself. I mean, I'm always impressed by Member Soon because her parents were, of course, directors here in the city, as I understand it, and she's literally somebody who was raised here in the city, and her passion for this was brought to that table for this city. So, and you can see it today. We also had Member Gay. Sarah Gay is the head of Hawaii Employer Council, which brings that whole private sector into our conversation and into the discussion. And then two director level, we both started from the ground, state employees, myself and Elmer Kai, who are both director level state employees. So we bring that, having lived and breathed it, I understand it's a state, but still. And then we have now coming in I haven't met her yet, but she too will be from the private sector. She runs an employment agency, as I understand it. She's helps for, recruiting. So she'll bring that level of, especially since we have a workforce situation, I look forward to her participation.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Maui Island in the 9-member panel is appointed by the mayor, approved by the council. On Hawaii Island, it's appointed by the mayor, approved by the council. It's not clear to me what Kauai does, but here we don't do it that way. Do you suggest that perhaps we should change it to that? And members, again, this is just for discussion's sake. Welcome back, Councilmember Kiaina. Do you want to opine on that at all? Or if you have no position?
I don't. I mean, I think, that we did hear criticism of there being, members that represent the council and members who represent mayor, and then there was one in between. I think as we discussed it, there were, frankly, I mean, in the last meeting, I was advocating for the mayor, and actually throughout this particular, I've been advocating for the mayor. So no, I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, maybe Soon does. But if I could add from the membership, also of note, 2 Native Hawaiians, right, within that mix. Native Hawaiian voice was part of that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Members, any follow-up questions for either or any of the testifiers for that matter? I do see Commissioner Soon had her hands up. Please proceed.
Sorry, it was just in response to your last question, Chair, about, I do think that if you kind of look at the council versus mayoral appointees, I think that it actually offers there's more diversity among those members. So I think maintaining what you folks have makes sense, but regardless, having both branches be involved in that discussion.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Members, any further questions for any of the testifiers? Seeing none, thank you both.
Thank you.
Members, as I mentioned, we have items number 2 through 8. Looks like each of us here in the room introduced a measure, except for you, Councilmember Kiaina. It runs the gamut, though, right? Just based on a cap, as an example, I believe one caps it at 10%, another caps it at 5%, and another caps it at 3.5%. And of course, mine in Resolution 24-105, I connected to the average based on collective bargaining. In other words, our salaries would be tied to city employees. If they get a raise, we get a raise. If they don't get a raise, the council doesn't get a raise. But I also want to bring up for discussion, should we be capping fine to cap us, in my opinion, but should we be capping the administration and the appointees based on what we just heard from the testimony? So Councilmember Kiaina, followed by Councilmember Tupola.
I don't have any comments right now on the administration because I think that the public outcry has been narrowly tailored toward the city council members. So my frame of mind is only focused on the council. So let me just say that just because I did not introduce something doesn't mean that I'm not interested in it. But I have to tell you, just looking at all of the memos that my staff have created, as well as all of the testimony and listening, all of this, it's still a lot to take in. So I would, and I'm listening to everything, and everyone knows that I'm not shy to make my viewpoints known, but this is not easy stuff, and I need to digest all of this, and I actually think it would be helpful for all of us to get the, because I was thinking as I was sitting here, it's kind of overwhelming because it's all different and they're all meritorious, that it would be nice to have a chart that could probably be created by the Office of Consular Services that does a comparative analysis of all, so that we know exactly consul approval, not consul approval, the different proposals for a cap, annually or biannually, right? All of the various issues, so that we know what we're going into, and then, I mean, hopefully that would be done in short order. This has to go through full council, but so that when we come back to committee, then all of us will have a better idea of what elements to kind of put together into a moving vehicle. For today's purposes, I would recommend that all bills be moved forward, because I believe that all of the proposals warrant further consideration. And after, I guess, I feel that we have this kind of like comparative chart, we could find out what is missing. You know, this is kind of unusual because, you know, we are used to just making legislation and passing it without having to go through a charter amendment. And so how we phrase the question, for example, is very important in the success of the measure. And so even with that, I want to make sure that not only are we aware of what the various elements are that we're trying to discuss for a final vehicle, but so the public themselves would know what we're dealing with, so that they could opine. The fact that there is not a lot of remote or in-person testimony is a little surprising to me, given you know, the uproar that occurred last year. Okay, and then going back to your original question, I will say this, that I feel that just because, just on the big picture level, because we are elected officials, apart from the mayor and the prosecuting attorney, we are more vulnerable to pushback when it comes to pay increases, a little unfairly, because if you look last year at the comparison of all of the salaries, no one was even blinking on all of the increase in salaries for the executive branch. And in June of last year, you know, after we had the consideration here, the Kailua Neighborhood Board actually had a robust discussion on this matter to offer a resolution pertaining to council members against the increase. And I respectfully asked them to include the executive branch, because why are we being arbitrarily targeted? But therein lies the problem, which is why I believe that we need to move measuredly and to digest all that the Salary Commission had recommended, as well as today's dialogue, all of the hard work that has been undertaken by all of the members for their various proposals, and think about how vulnerable we are with regard to making decisions on our salary. So anything that would be fair to the public, you know, perception-wise, but fair to the council members is what I'm going to be seeking for. So thank you for allowing this. I would like to think, because everybody has taken heed of what happened, and we don't want to repeat for future commissioners or future council members, that that's why we don't have the outcry, because I would like to think that there is a level of confidence that the public knows that we're going to address it. I just want to make sure that we address it in a comprehensive fashion, where, again, not only we know what we're voting on, the public knows as well. And maybe at the second hearing, they're going to come and opine on that. And so I'm looking to you for leadership because I know that you have shepherded this issue for the council and taken into account what you've done as well as the other members. I'm looking forward to when it goes to full council and coming back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And just for everyone's information, I do intend to recommend that we pass all the measures. Exactly what Councilmember Kia Aina pointed out, that I think all of them are meritorious in one way or another. And based on the actual lack of in-person and remote testimony today, I think it does merit another full hearing on every one of these matters, because they are different in a bunch of different ways. But that is going to be my recommendation, but we're still in discussion. Councilmember Tupola.
Thanks so much, Chair. And thank you, Councilmember Kiernan, for your thoughts. I do agree. I mean, I have my own chart going, so I can share with OCS if you want, because it's hard, right? It's hard to remember, and so I just kind of did a side-by-side comparison. And to be honest, I actually like someone else's better than my own. So I was like, Councilmember Wire, I was like, this is interesting. So I think we all liked each other's ones a little bit. We liked ours a little bit, but then also hearing this conversation, we're like, okay, wait, because when you shared the Kauai verbiage, I was like, ooh, that verbiage is what I was looking for. So I think for me, what you just mentioned about elected versus appointed, and that's why I posed the question to Commissioner Soon, is I really think it's different. I mean, for us to be accountable to the public, that's who we get voted in by, that's who we're accountable to, that's who we interact with, like, that is so much different than the band director or like the head of, it's a different level because we work for them. They are our bosses. They are the ones that put us in this office. So I think, to your point, I do think that there has to be a step towards, us not being able to vote on our own salary. And that would kind of like, the Kauai language would possibly solve that. And then maybe if there was a cap on elected officials, but maybe not on the others, because Commissioner Soon has a good point. I mean, some of them that are so far behind and they're in cabinet positions, I mean, they really don't need to be here. They could be working somewhere else in the private sector. I think we need to take into consideration that there may be a little bit more leeway that they need in order to make sure that it's comparable. I mean, that's what we argue about all the time in the budget. Why is this position not filled? Why is this position not filled? So again, I wouldn't want to tie their hands on that, especially if it was somebody who was leading the department and we couldn't fill it because it was so far behind. Lastly, I think that the interaction with us and the mayor to the proposal, that's the other thing we have to discuss, right? Is should we have interaction with it? Should we not have interaction with it? Because, I had suggested let's have a public hearing to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. And maybe the public hearing is on the appointed side, not the, I don't know. I just think that that's also what we have to determine, is because, Councilmember Wire's proposal suggested we stay out of it and only the mayor can reject it. That's a thought, because maybe we are out of budget. I don't know. Maybe that's something the mayor has to determine, is like, can I really handle what's being suggested? Because we don't know what future years will look like. So maybe at least leaving it for his cabinet to decide, hey, we got to balance this budget better, and us stay out of it. So those are my thoughts preliminarily. I did sign to propose one, and I'm hoping that we can kind of narrow it down to those three things, right? Is appointed versus elected, whether we interact with it or don't interact with it, and then whether or not there's the cap, maximum and minimum. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I think that was very well said. The fact that, and I want other folks to chime in, because we may want to narrow this to those three things or others. I do also want to point out that along those lines, whether or not we should be voting on our own salaries, right? I've been maintaining publicly and here that I believe it's a conflict of interest, because we're personally benefiting from this. And we do have the executive director of the Ethics Commission here, if anybody wants to further that discussion. But just looking at Kauai, Hawaii Island, and Maui Island, each of these three jurisdictions, the commission determines the salaries of the electeds and the appointeds, and there is no vote on it from the city council. And I think that's why we all feel uncomfortable dealing with this today. And initially, folks, I wanted the Charter Commission to take care of this. But because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 measures, I thought, you know, let's do it. Let's have a conversation of this. I do want to point out, though, that 3 of the measures say no vote by the council. Just let the commission do it. And 4 of them, of the measures, say that it should be a forced vote. One of them even changing it from 3/4 of the commission, of the council, excuse me, to a simple majority. So that's up for discussion as well. By the way, I don't know how the Charter Commission 10 years ago came up with 3/4 of 9 members. It just doesn't make sense, right? Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. I really am grateful for the discussion today, and I'm thankful that we have a more respectful discussion compared to last year. And I want to thank the commissioners who are here, the chair and Commissioner Soon online. A lot of the things that I think were brought up last year by myself and others are coming, bringing to the forefront again. And I really think as the voters get more educated on the process, I think a lot of the things that were the rhetoric out there is actually not actually accurate because we don't vote on it. But for some reason, our council has the authority to then take what the commission does and then defer it, which is what we stated, just like I said last year, 19 out of the 33 times. So, in my intent of the resolution, the 23-193, was at that point to remove us from the process so that it's not a political thing, not to remove accountability or transparency, but just we see what had happened in the past for almost 20 years. And the goal was to remove us because like we mentioned, for all the reasons that were shared today, there's a purpose in what we're doing. And I see this as a calling as well. I mean, I think most of us here aren't here, like you said, to get wealthy, but we have to be able to be sensible and accurate. And what we're expected to do is not just even focus on one department. We're focusing on the mayor's 20-something different departments, and we have to, working with our team, make decisions for the city, and we have a large city here. So the reason I presented my reso was to kind of mirror what you said, what Maui and it sounds like Kauai is also doing, where the council, after the commission sets it, the council then doesn't have a say. We just, that's what the charter requires them to do. That's what goes forward. But I do like the options to kind of have a hybrid of if there's a cap, and I really appreciate the commissioners sharing the danger of making a cap if we don't have a baseline. But if we got to the point where every year, like you mentioned, we are following the bargaining units, where if city employees are getting a raise and we do as well, and if they don't, then we don't. And that's how it is, or we don't have a 20-year gap that has to be made up. And I think that's the most sensible thing to do. The numbers maybe we can work out, and we have to work it out with the mayor and the budget and amongst ourselves to see what fits best. But I just wanted to kind of explain why I presented this option. And it was after the commission and all of the headaches that we had to go through last year. I shouldn't say headaches, but the deal, what we had to deal with last year, this was introduced because my intent was to then remove it so that any future council didn't have to do what we had to do and make that hard decision of not kicking the can down the road. And I think, for the most part, I've been able to explain this to even my neighborhood boards, talk to some board members, and many times they're just not informed on the whole situation. And they know that that those of us who are doing this the right way, which I think most of us are, if not all, we don't have time. Like they ask me, do you do anything else? And I'm doing this. I have no time for anything else. And that's the reality, that if you're actually digging into your district, I wish I had more time in my day to then do something else, but I don't. Other than my family and this, there's not much else time in the day to do. So the question of part-time versus full-time, we make it our own for sure. But when my neighborhood board member asked me, are you doing anything else? Can you make any? I don't have that time. I don't have that luxury. So when we're talking about proper compensation, and I'll really know that, we don't get overtime. We don't get paid past the time that 40 hours. If we're working 80 hours a week, then that's it. And I think at the end of the day, if the voters aren't happy with what we're doing, then they come to us. And then we like Councilmember Tupola said, we do have to answer to them. But in my experience, I'm grateful for those in my district who have either been supportive or who haven't understood. And when I explain it to them, they understand, and they can reasonably be explained and have the conversation so that they understand why we're doing what we're doing, the depth of our our responsibilities and the importance of what we're doing and how we really have the heart to serve. And so I just wanted to explain that, and I will gladly turn it back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I need to appoint you again, Councilmember Wakimoto. We lost quorum.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your comments. I again want to point out what our neighbor islands do. On Kauai Island, again, it says the respective appointing authority may set the salary of an appointee at a figure lower than the maximum figure established by the Salary Commission for that position, provided that the elected officers may voluntarily accept a lower salary than the maximum. So what Kauai does is they say to the mayor, you can actually pay your directors less if you want to. And for electeds, we voluntarily, which I believe each of us are doing this time around, we're voluntarily accepting less. But Kauai writes it right in their charter. So I just want to bring that up for discussion as well. Councilmember Tolba, any further comments or issues you wanted to talk about? No? Okay. Councilmember Wire, Okimoto, or Tupoli? Okay, please proceed.
I just wanted to know, and I hear you saying you're going to pass all of them out. I just wanted to know kind of what is the next step. So will your office be kind of trying to do a chart and file it as a council communication? And because I was thinking, do we try to amend our own ones to kind of show what we agree with more so that you can kind of see, you know, okay, it sounds like, because there's ideas here today, right? So I'm like, okay, well, should I amend mine to kind of go with the ideas that other people have so that we can get more of where we need to go? Or what is your thoughts?
Well, the first idea actually is to suggest that we pass them all out, right? It'll go to second reading at the next full council. And then absolutely, if you have any further amendments that you'd like to make through a committee draft, that would be the perfect time to do it after second reading. I'm happy to help making a chart or tasking Office of Council Services to make the chart. I just want to make sure we're not violating sunshine by doing that, if one of us make it or if the Office of Council Services do it. So let me look into that. To the extent that without violating sunshine, you're able to share the chart that you made, that would be great. But again, we'll ask our attorneys. We want to make sure that we're not in violation of the sunshine law. But again, really, really good conversation today. I do want to pass all measures out, and I'm hoping that we have more input at the next executive management committee hearing, and perhaps we can invite the rest of the council members to come and join us in this discussion. Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. You know, just along those lines too, given that everybody may be working on amendments, and just to answer your earlier question, I also agree with limiting to elected officials for the reasons that Councilmember Tupola brought up, and also the ones that Commissioner Soon brought up. You know, I think the example of our medical examiner is a great example. You know, with the backlog we have of corpses right now and bereaved families waiting because of the vacancy with the forensic pathologists, and the medical examiner at a few meetings ago was like, someone asked what happens when he retires, and he's like, oh, the department is done, right? And that's not funny. Like, it's the reality. And so I do think like having that flexibility, and that's why I also think them meeting annually is ideal, because if, say, he does retire in between, right, it gives at least the city flexibility to assess all tools needed to fill essential, you know, positions, or particularly public safety positions as well, right, that we don't want to leave vacant. And so that's kind of like just my thought with leaving it to just elected officials. And my thoughts about us not getting involved is just because I do think, following the practice of all of the other neighbor island counties and not having us actually dive into the voting, you know, I think if folks want to give it back, that's great. But I do think that they probably are onto something if everyone else does it except for us. And, you know, as mentioned, I think the Civil Beat article that was put out that walked through some of the analysis, highlighted the best practice being for, folks just not to be able to vote on their own salary. I know, I just think it's best practice in that sense. And I think that kind of covers my overall thoughts. So just wanted to share those and appreciate the conversation. Mahalo.
No, thank you very much. So today there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us. It'd be great if we can get all 9 of us at the next hearing. But to the extent that we want to go into it today, do we want to talk about whether or not we should do a cap and at what level? Or do we want to be tied to collective bargaining? Do you folks want to get into that today, or shall we put that off until the next executive management committee? Councilmember Wire.
I just asked, would we have time, if it's put off till next EM committee, to defer before third reading, or would that put us beyond the charter amendment cutoff?
Well, one of the things I thought about doing is perhaps having, if we need to, 2 meetings in between second and third reading, if necessary.
Yeah, so I'll defer, because I know Chair will meet the deadline in whatever mechanism we need to. So I'll defer on whether folks want to have the conversation today.
Any thoughts, Councilmember Tupola?
So Chair, I think that the cap conversation is important, but I think maybe like step 1 in my head is whether or not we believe there should be a differentiation between electeds and non, because I think that would tell me whether or not I agree cap, no cap. So we don't need to resolve that now, but I was trying to think of the 3 different things I brought up and in which priority order I would handle it, because understanding 1 would help me understand 2, and then so then we could move to whether or not a cap, then we could move to whether or not a vote based upon what we think. So that's just a thought, because I hear what you're saying. We might need to massage it out a little bit. And just as a heads up, if we are going to have 2 readings, which might be a good idea to discuss it more, if we could kind of know ahead of time, because I think this committee doesn't meet regularly, so it also wasn't a normal time for people to say, oh, 2:30 Thursday, I better be there. So to Councilmember Kiana's point, like, I think there'd be more input, but I think just maybe notice ahead of the 4-day filing might help. Thank you.
No, very good points. The other, I thought, I was just handed a note, we could consider doing amendments like we do for the budget, which everybody files their suggestions, and then we can discuss that all just like we do in the budget process. Yeah. Okay, and I like your idea of perhaps announcing the next executive management meeting early so that we can get more input. Yeah.
Chair.
Councilmember Wire, followed by Councilmember Kia Aina.
No, I just wanted to ask, since we're lucky to have the commissioners here, if Chair or anyone else had any thoughts on process.
I've been itchy to respond to this elected and take some steps back to why we did the EM8, if that's helpful to this conversation, because I'm a little confused by elected or not, because the reason we tethered to the EM8 was as a division chief. And again, you've heard us earlier say, Rebecca Membersoon described that there were a number of recommendations made in that initial PIG. And we actually arrived on the EM8 as a division chief. There's varying sizes of division chiefs in this city and state. And this gets a little personal, so bear with me. My husband was the warden of Halava for most of his career. And when we arrived on that, his position was an EM8 or EM7. It was that high level. And it sort of made sense to me that you said earlier, you have 120, 150,000 constituents. You all are, if as a director, he was like a mayor, you all are wardens of your council districts. You're the front face, you are responsible for the budget, the policies, the 24/7-ness. So I'm still perplexed why there's this elective versus not when we've tethered you based on the ordinance to this EM level, because it makes sense on that, right? That kind of, and again, there's varying sizes of division chiefs here in the city, and that's where that is. So my suggestion is you stick to the EM8 and you do the BU, and there is some wonkiness in that BU, right? Like this year, the EM8s were going to get 8% as a starting, so we didn't want to do that. We wanted to stick to that 3.59 that all the rest of the BUs are getting. So that's something to consider. Thank you.
Well, just a thought that since you did tie us to the EM8, that's the base salary, but going forward, that's why I made my suggestion of tying our future salaries to the collective bargaining, because you did the catch up, right? So then you just tie it to collective bargaining, so it's predictable every year. But the other argument is that, hey, we should cap it at a certain amount. But I hear what you're saying. We don't want to, the whole reason why there would be a cap, if I'm hearing you all correctly, is because, well, one, people don't want to happen what happened last year at a 64% raise, right? Although I will point out that the Big Island did something very similar, by the way, which amounted to, I think, about a 24% raise. But anyway, the whole idea of a cap was because people were upset about last year. So we don't want to necessarily cap the appointed positions like the medical examiner or DIT, because otherwise we probably won't be able to fill those positions if we cap it. So that was the idea. But yet, I mean, as elected officials, that might be the, the way to solve the problem that people perceive to be last year.
Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Topola.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you to the chair for her thoughts. Respectfully, I still disagree that we are deputy or directors, because we are not over hundreds of people. We don't manage thousands of people in ENV or DFM, or we have 5 employees, most of us, not yourself. But I think that pairing it to same constituency size, same position, that makes sense to me. But I think we have to let go of that whole, well, we need to make it make sense in a departmental stepwise, because we're just not. We have unlimited vacation, unlimited sick days. We don't have to check in every day and check out. We just don't have the same HR requirements. So respectfully, I think that's why we have to separate out electeds and non, not just because we have different HR requirements, but because we are beholden to different employers per se. The other ones are the employed of the city and county. Yes, we are, but the people who put us in office are the people who voted for us. So I think for me, that's a big sticking point, because I think that no matter how we look at EM8 or whatever it is, the community just looks at us as community servants. I just don't think we can change their perspective of it and say, hey, by the way, this is just because we're at the same step as director. It's not going to make any sense. I think we got to make this as simple as possible, which is why I think your suggestion on the collective bargaining is simple, predictable, because then there's no surprises. Then nobody is, stuck with some surprise that they never heard of. And it's apples and oranges, but at the end of the day, to them, it's all apples and apples, even though it's, different because of what we have to do. So I would hope that we could either with that, collective bargaining, or with Councilmember Wires' proposal 3.5, which a lot of people said that was like a regular amount, right? 1% to 3% is a regular increase that people might get at a job or whatnot. That might make more sense. And I think we have to try to make it make sense for the public, I think. And that's why I think for the electeds, it might be just a different, what would you call it, outward story. Like, we have to tell this story to our communities and our neighborhood boards, and just, very basic, like, this is what we think would be best, and that would not harm the public, but serve them the best. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate your comments, Chair Espinda. Councilmember Kiana, did you still want to say a few words before we take the vote?
Did he already?
Councilmember Wire, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure, again, just because there's so much going on, right? So for me, I only want to focus on the city council, because I didn't know that there was a problem with the other one. No one's been expressing concerns over. So then I just want to make sure I understand the issues. One, of course, is whether it be annual or biannual. The second is whether it be a specified percentage or connected to the salary for, I don't know which collective bargaining unit, the E8 or a collective bargain, but whatever it is, it's either a percentage, whether it's 3.5, 7, or 10, or connected to something, and then the role of the city council having a say in it. I guess I'm trying to make sure I understand. Is there anything else that I'm missing that we still is still left to determine apart? Because I'm not already thinking about the executive branch again. I'm only looking at annual or biannual, percentage or connected to a collective bargaining unit percentage, so that it's not based on a percentage, and whether or not the city council has a role in approving it or not. What are the other issues again that that are those the issues?
Can I add one more?
Yeah,
Councilmember, well, before, let me comment. Do we want to, and then I'll address Councilmember Tupola. That's a good question. Do we want to just limit it to our amendments to the city council and not deal with the appointeds or elected? So one option is we just do city council. Second option is we do all electeds. And the third option is we also include appointeds. Right? I mean, but what I also want to suggest, everything's on the table in my mind, right? These are charter amendments. And that's why I brought up, and I'm hoping folks take a look at what the neighbor islands do too, because they have some interesting ways of dealing with this that aren't in any of our
are you going to share that with us?
Resolutions on the table. Yeah, I think we're going to file it as a council communication.
Okay, so Chair Waters then, and then I know Councilmember Tupola has, so electeds or non-electeds, right? Annual or biannual percentage or connected to a certain pay salary, and city council role or not in approval. Is there any other thing that is missing?
Councilmember Tupola?
I don't know if this is related, but I do think the one that Council Chair Waters brought up that I think is a good idea is whether it happens in our election cycle or out of our election cycle.
Yes. Councilmember Kia, I know.
That's a good point. Yes. So the fifth would be when it occurs. And again, this is just more based on, what I'm hearing. I just want to be better prepared to comment. And then Chair Waters, can I ask, as we proceed, you talked about a process. Was there going to be a specific measure that you wanted us to opine on, or how were you going to solicit our comments?
You had stepped out, I think, for a minute. What I was going to suggest is we do the same thing we do with the budget bill, where everybody can file through a council communication what their suggested amendments are.
But amendments to which vehicle?
That's still up for a vote. We could choose any one of these as long as we're in agreement. But ultimately, it's majority rules, right? I mean, we can today or do it on another day, which vehicle you prefer, right? I hope we could do that when the whole council is here and talk about it, because we're still missing Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, Say, and Cordero. Rather than us five choose the vehicle, I think we as a council should choose the vehicle.
So,
or we could also, I mean, that's my suggestion. If you want to narrow it down right now, we could vote no on any measure that you want. I'm suggesting we pass them all.
Okay.
But members, feel free to vote no. Vote your conscience.
I'm not sharing, I'm not expressing that. I guess I worry about this process you're talking about, because I don't know if I support that. I would rather know that we know the universe of issues, we come prepared for a vibrant discussion, and we vote on it at that committee meeting. That would be my preference. Because this is such a emotional issue, and what we're going to send you, and then people are going to say, why are I think it's unnecessary. I think I'd rather. I
honestly don't understand what you're asking me.
I guess what you said that we would file amendments.
That each of us can submit their suggestions, and I'll incorporate them all and bring them up for discussion. But each one of these measures is on for a vote today. If you don't like one or the other, please, members, vote your conscience. I just asked the clerk, our attorneys, if I could take them all one time, because that was my initial intent. to put them all up for second reading. But if members, if you got a problem with any of these matters, let's do this individually. And you can vote no if you want to vote no. All right, why don't we do that? Any further discussion? Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. And just to make sure I'm understanding process, I appreciate, the discussion, because I think each resolution does kind of approach it a little bit differently. And so I know you had said to file like the budget amendments that we do. And so we'd be able to see, let's say I file amendments on like 3 different resolutions. Folks would all see like, oh, those are the ones that he filed. Is that kind of how you envision it? So just making sure after Vice Chair's questions. Okay, appreciate that.
Yes.
Chair, can I just go over really quick the list? So we're looking at, from everybody's input, you mentioned annual, biannual. We're looking at percentage or bargaining units and whether the council can approve it or not. And then if we're looking at, are we looking at the council, all electeds or electeds and non-electeds? I just want to make sure what I heard in the discussion. And then when the salary increase is proposed, when it occurs, after election or before. And then, was that all I heard?
Actually, members, I understand what Councilmember Kian is saying. You want to limit the issues.
No, I don't want to.
But I don't think that's the appropriate thing to do today, right? Especially in light of the fact that what you asked for was a chart to say what each one of these is doing. So I think you're putting the chart before the horse. No, seriously. But members, I don't think we can do that right now. Unless we continue this discussion. Do we want a cap? Yes or no? Do we want to limit it to collective bargaining? Yes or no? Right? Do we want to deal with that today?
No.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Kiana.
Well, first of all, no, I did not say that I'm narrowing it. I'm just there's so much information. I'm trying to digest this and organize this in my head. So that's why I'm doing it. So, and I want to be better prepared when we come back, and I'm still in support of passing all measures out. I just wanted to add an additional thought to just remind ourselves that affirmation of whether this is part-time or full-time is probably something to consider. So that's all.
I'm okay with that. And you're free to make amendments to any one of these on the table that you like. And you're free to introduce a separate measure as well. Just keep in mind that we do have a timetable because this is going to go on the ballot. And we need to get it done in a timely manner. Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. So I think, pass everything out today. I think the chart should help us to know the categories, what Councilmember Okimoto and Kiana just said. That will help all of us because it'll put it within the 4 or 5 categories that we're all debating back and forth between. I think when we come back to this committee, simple, we just use your resolution and try to amend that or suggest things to that so that we can kind of take it like the budget and either insert or take out. And then, I think notifying people ahead of time, and then we should be good. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's July 10th that we have to finish all the readings in order to get it on the ballot. So just for public information, full council is May 15th. We come back between May and June, we'd have another committee hearing, and then we'd have the June full council. So we probably will make, the cutoff, but that's why we might need to have a couple more hearings. So yeah, I think it's for what we've discussed today, I think we let it sit, maybe not make any more further decisions, and then come back to this again once we have a chart in front of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, members? Seeing none. Okay, the chair recommends that resolution 23-193, resolution 24-082, resolution 24-085, resolution 24-086, and resolution 24-087, resolution 24-091, and resolution 24-105 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objections? Remember, if we have any objections, we take a roll call vote on any one of the objections. Seeing no objections, so ordered. Okay, members, that completes our calendar. Thank you very much for a robust discussion, and look forward to another full discussion at second reading. We are adjourned.